Okay, good afternoon, you lot. That's my clock again, just ignore that. So I'm going to take you through the poem, which is Walking Away, Cecil Day Lewis. This is, once again, a nice and easier poem out of the cluster. I personally like to compare this with Mother Any Distance. However, other poems that compare quite nicely to this are ones which we have yet to cover. There's Climbing My Grandfather, Follower, and actually in some ways one that we have covered, but I've yet to make a video on it, is Before You Were Mine. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into the poem. This shouldn't be as long, this video, just because it's nice and quick to go through. The AO3 content connecting to the writer's intentions is quite brief, but it's nice and easy to get your head around. So, Cecil Day Lewis is quite a modern poem, as you can see. It's not the Victorian era or anything. If you want to be specific, it's the Edwardian era, as you should know from Inspector Calls. It is a poem which is personal to him. If you want to be very specific, it's believed to be about his son, Sean. So obviously he has a son and he had to separate himself from his son. And this is the feelings in which he personally experienced through this separation. A way in which it is quite different to Mother Any Distance is, for me, the tone here. It is definitely more melancholy. Meaning that, and somber. Meaning that it's kind of got a bit more of a darker tone to it. It's not as happy, it's not as positive. Whereas in Mother Any Distance, it was very much about you go ahead and you do you, I will be there to support you, from the parent's perspective. Another difference is that this is the parent speaking about their child, whereas in Mother Any Distance, it is the child essentially addressing or writing a letter directly to the parent. The fact that this person speaking, the narrator, isn't having that kind of personal connection in comparison to Mother Any Distance, where it was a letter format, it suggests that maybe their relationship isn't as strong, or it's maybe just one-sided, where this parent is desperately trying to hold on whilst the child is just kind of minding their own business and walking away. This isn't to say that this child has a bad relationship with the parent at all. It is just because, in my view, it's because this child is a lot younger. So when kids are a lot younger, they're more keen to get away from their parents because they don't fully understand nor empathise with the kind of close connection and the special bond that a parent has with their child, or a child has with their parent. So he was born in Ireland, raised in the UK, not that that's particularly important. You don't need too much context for this poem. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. The highlighted parts that I have to this poem, there's lots of natural imagery linking to nature. I believe that this is for the purpose of showing how life goes on, how time is inevitable, and these changes which parents have to make between their relationships with their child is something which is just a natural process of them getting older. The fact that the title was Walking Away instantly shows that this is obviously a very profound moment for them. They felt, I have kind of connections with this title to infer that it means potentially that they felt kind of hurt by it. So if it hurt, felt personally not offended, but personally struck by this key moment. Okay, we'll go ahead and read our first verse. The natural imagery, by the way, I have highlighted bits or examples throughout the poem. So if you want to go ahead and you haven't annotated the poem with me in class, just look through my highlighted quotes and maybe you can nick some as example. So 18 years ago, almost to the day, a sunny day with leaves just turning, the touchline's new ruled since I watched you play your first game of football, then, like a satellite wrenched from its orbit, go drifting away. So the fact that they remember the date, I'll let you make these annotations because I don't want to overcrowd the page. The fact that they remember the date suggests that they obviously miss their child. It's something which they keep reflecting on. Potentially it could suggest that they are stuck in the past. Stuck in the past. You could use or connect this idea, if you weren't going to take my recommendation of what to compare this poem with. The same ideas of them feeling stuck in the past was also shown in poems such as When We Two Parted. And there's also other poems, but I've not annotated them with you yet. So we'll go across them and I'll try and make references as we go along. So it's 18 years ago, almost to the day. The caesura here, spelled Caesura, meaning a stop, a punctuation which forces you to stop when reading the poem. This caesura shows, and it almost pronounces and accentuates this first line, the fact that this first line is very key to him. And it's something which makes him often maybe stop, maybe even on a daily basis, in memory of that time where they felt so hurt as to leave their child, and that separation that they had with their child when they were younger. A sunny day with leaves just turning. So it was obviously, as you could take the literal meaning that it was sunny and the sun went. But if we're going to connect it to pathetic fallacy, which I'm going to ask you to do here. Pathetic fallacy. Why do they use pathetic fallacy? Writers, it often conveys a certain mood, a certain tone, atmosphere. So the sunny day with leaves just turning. So it suggests that this change, he went from sunny, meaning if we're going to connect pathetic fallacy, he changed from feeling very happy and content within their relationship to something which is a little bit more miserable, a little bit more melancholy or somber. Now, the leaves just turning, that is an expression to suggest that it's the seasons of the year are just changing from summer to autumn. Okay, so you could maybe extend this pathetic fallacy analysis, and especially the annotations, which I'm not going to make for you. But it could suggest that he was very happy, and it was kind of a final ending to their happy state, to their codependency upon one another, where the child was ready to move on. Leaves just turning suggested that he's now reached a stage in his life where he feels like a lot of us do during autumn seasons, quite lonely, quite miserable, isolated, things like that. So you could connect that here. The touchline's new ruled since I watched you play your first game of football, then like a satellite wrenched from its orbit, go drifting away. So Cecil Day Lewis, he uses this football game as a metaphor, almost like metaphorically. Recali symbolizes their maturity, meaning their child's maturity. Now I'll explain my reasoning behind that analysis. So the touchline's new ruled, if you think about a touchline in a pitch, so there'd be the game, let's say just for instance, this side of the touchline, this is my touchline, this side we've got the kids playing their football match, and then we've got a parent just waiting on the side cheering their child on. Okay, I'm going to stop my drawings there. So the touchline new rule, this touchline could metaphorically maybe convey their new boundaries. I did explain this to my class, but the new boundaries such as when you're younger, pretty much your parents are allowed to give, they are fully permitted to give you any rules, since it's their house, it's essentially you are living with them day by day, hour by hour. So the rules which are set, you have to obey. However, when I believe that this quotation here means that there's been new boundaries set. For instance, when kids first go to school, the parents are no longer allowed to, or definitely shouldn't, be telling you to do some of the things that they would have done if you were in primary or nursery school. So there's been new kind of boundaries and rules set in place. So it also could quite literally and symbolically show the separation and the divide between the parent and the child's new life. Since I watched you play your first game of football, so it's the first game of football, the fact that they watched as well. It's quite passive. So this verb, watched, you can say it's passive, which means that they weren't intervening, they weren't personally interacting with their child. They were watching from the sideline, suggesting that they're no longer a part or no longer intervening and interrupting their own personal development. It's now up to them and they stay away on the other side of that touchline. Your first game of football, then like a satellite wrenched from its orbit, go drifting away. Now, I've already pre-sketched this metaphor just because I usually do an awful job otherwise. So then like a satellite wrenched from its orbit, you guys should know that that device is a simile. You have like here, so long as it's like or as, it would be making it a simile. So like a satellite wrenched from its orbit. He's comparing this moment, watching his child playing the football game, as quite painful. So imagine that the parent is the planet, let's just say planet Earth, and the child, their relationship before, the child is the satellite. So their relationship before this child was ready to move on and develop and progress as a human being, their relationship was very, very close. It was very tight. They had a close bond with one another and they both relied on each other equally. For instance, the satellite relies on Earth in order to maintain its orbit, and Earth relies on satellites, obviously, for mainly communications with the internet and phones, etc., etc. Now, for him, he uses this satellite. Cecil Day Lewis chooses to use this satellite and the simile of the satellite to say that it's been wrenched from him, to suggest that the painfulness and the kind of almost the codependency that he also had, or this connection that he had with his child, he feels like it's been taken away from him. But it's not taken away because Mother Any Distance, this distance was more accepting and it was more allowing the child to have, or the child encouraging the parent to understand how they need this separation. However, the parent in this poem, in my opinion, seems to be a lot more clingy and unwilling to kind of detach himself to this child. It goes drifting away. Drifting away sounds very dramatic. It sounds almost theatrical and sad. The enjambment used here is quite literally, or should I say metaphorically, expressing the way in which it has been, it's almost reenacting the way it's been wrenched from the orbit and drifting away. So it's quite cleverly used here, the use of enjambment, the continuation of one line onto the next with no form of punctuation. Behind a scatter of boys, I can see you walking away from me towards the school with the pathos of a half-fledged thing set free into the wilderness, the gait of one who finds no path where the path should be. So behind a scatter of boys, this boy who's still in his football match, he's noticed that he's gone away to a scatter of boys. The adjective scatter, the scatter of boys, kind of suggests that the childish nature of this boy he's looking at, also to suggest kind of the unpredictable nature of what's going to happen to their child, or the uncertainty or maybe even doubt that their child will go away and be able to be independent and managed by themselves. So it could be that the child is a bit of maybe gives him reason to believe that he wouldn't manage by himself. However, I believe that potentially it shows sign that the writer or that narrator is quite a paranoid parent or overly protective. You can kind of show the nervousness of him looking at this scatter of boys through the caesura as well. Kind of suggests that he really focuses on that and maybe cares about it, was concerned. I can see you walking away from it, with the pathos of a half-fledged thing set free. That means with the emotion of a half-fledged thing set free. He uses, once again, this kind of nature or animal imagery of like a half-fledged bird, one in which that was also, or actually the same metaphor that was used in Mother Any Distance. If you remember, there was that quote, hatched. I believe it's in the last 3 lines of the poem where it says hatch. They use the same bird imagery, almost for the same reasons. So that beautiful comparison could be used there. The fact, once again, the same way in which the scatter of boys, it shows doubt that this parent feels towards their child growing up and being able to manage them on their own. The use of the half-fledged thing shows that he's incomplete, sign of immaturity. He's not fully grown, not fully independent, and capable of looking after himself. Into the wilderness. This could be symbolic to kind of how this parent views the outside world, the independent world, as being wild. You could connect this with being dangerous, so it could symbolize danger. It could symbolize the unknown. It could symbolize the unpredictable outcomes of life, which I'm pretty sure we can all relate to. The gate of one who finds no path where the path should be. This is to suggest that for this narrator, life's answers and life's pathways, metaphorical there, there's no easy answer and it is never so clear. And maybe he's concerned that this child is kind of being a bit naive about the challenges of life. I'm just going to move myself potentially over to the table. So then we come down to the final stanza. So, okay. So, I know we don't. We come down to the second final one. So the hesitant figure eddying away like a winged seed loosened from its parent stem. Once again, I did the drawing up here. So the parent could be this this kind of stem. This could be this plant where they represent someone who is rooted and someone who is going to be grounded within this child's kind of independency and growth. The child, let's say, that represents this winged seed, if you think about it, it kind of connects with the idea of mother any distance, and the unpredictable nature or outcomes of their child's development, whether they will fall or fly. It's almost the same metaphor used here, because the child could represent this winged seed, and winged seeds from dandelions, they either go ahead and become dandelions themselves, or they consequently die, or just they don't fertilize, they don't become anything. So once again, there's this uncertainty of where this child, the winged seed, is going to go, and like what their outcome is going to be. The fact that the parent relates themselves to this dandelion or to the stem suggests that they are there to support them. So you still get the same supportive kind of notion, which you also received from Mother Any Distance, with the idea of the spacewalking or the measuring tape, the fact that there is that strong bond, strong connection. However, I feel like this narrator doubts themselves, the parent doubts themselves a little bit more with the support that they'll be able to give when they are being independent or when they choose to be independent. I love the metaphor here. So it says, it's the small, the scorching ordeals with which fire one's irresolute clay. Irresolute clay is clay which hasn't been, it's like when you go to, I'm not sure how many of you have actually done this, but on movies maybe, where you see somebody trying to kind of mold clay on that machine that spins round and round and round, and you have to shape it with your hands, and have to put your hand inside of, let's say, a vase and make sure that it's rounded and curvatured in the correct way. Now, what's it's referring to here, the irresolute clay, it means the unhardened clay. So it hasn't gone into the kiln, the furnace yet. It's still soft. This could also link to the child, the fact that they are soft, they're easy to break, they're easily moldable. Okay, but the same way a child needs to mold into their personality. So it could show the vulnerability of the child. And the firing, the irresolute clay, could represent the dangers of life, potentially. More positive connotations maybe of there being hope, the hopefulness of becoming this person you want to be, this clay. Finally, the final verse. So I have had worse partings, but none that so gnaws on my mind still. Gnaws relates to me, it relates to something almost like a mouse. Seems quite painful, and it gnaws on his mind still, to suggest that he's not been able to overcome these feelings of anxiety or nervousness of their child's development, potentially. Perhaps it is roughly saying what God alone could perfectly show. This, to be honest, this quote would be good for people with higher ability. Lower ability students, you might find it a little bit tricky getting your head around, or actually just students that don't have general knowledge on the Bible, which I know in a secular age that we're not exactly, not many of us are all going to church on Sunday. I'll try and break it down to you, however. So this is the parent saying, perhaps it's roughly saying, well, God alone could perfectly show. Obviously, God in the Bible, he's been known, or it's been said that he made everything perfectly, you know, exactly in his image, exactly what he wanted it to be. He's relating God and is the parent. He was obviously kind of a spiritual parent to Jesus. So God alone could perfectly show. It's almost as though the narrator, the parent, is jealous of the fact that God could create his prodigy, his son, Jesus, as perfectly and as easily as he did. So you could think about this adverb perfectly and suggest that there is a kind of slight tone of jealousy or bitterness. Then it goes on and the biblical reference kind of continues. So it says how selfhood begins with the walking away. So God, in the Bible, he essentially sent down Jesus. He made a risk, or he took a risk. He sent down Jesus into this world in order to teach, in order for there to be a good and well-deserved outcome. So although he essentially lost his son, God lost a spiritual part of himself, Jesus, it taught not only, it just taught a bigger lesson. It had a bigger purpose than just that one painful experience. The same way that this parent here is having to let go of their son in order to have, although it might be painful, in order to have better consequences in the future, such as their child will be able to respect their parent more for giving them a space, and they will become more rounded individuals and hopefully do good for the world. So it ends, and love is proved in the letting go. It's a conclusive ending, and it's once again it's an ending which could reflect. It's a well-known saying actually, but it could reflect that biblical reference once again that love is proved in the letting go, because God loved the world and all his people that he made, so he had to let go of his spiritual component, Jesus, in order for the greater good. I really quickly want to just go across the rhyme scheme. Actually, and slightly the format as well. So these stanzas, we don't call them paragraphs, they're stanzas or verses. They're very consistent. For me, it could metaphorically represent kind of the stability and the reliability of their parents' support for their child. Then we have the rhyming structure. So once again, a bit of a higher ability comment to make, but we have A, B, A, C, A in the first verse. The reason being is because day, play, and away, they all rhyme. So that would be the first letter of the alphabet you always start on the first line. So because day also rhymes with play, you put A there, A on the third line, and A on the fifth. Then we go to the second line because those are left out, those don't rhyme. So we'll check to see if they pair up. So turning and satellite, they don't rhyme. So you'll have to just go to the next letter of the alphabet, which is B and C. So it goes A, B, A, C, A. Then it follows the same pattern in the second verse. So it goes B, E, D, F, D. So C, free, and B. We're literally just continuing the alphabet from the first verse, by the way. So we have D rhyming, C rhyming with free and B, so they'd all be Ds. And then E and F, school and one, obviously don't rhyme together, so they'd be continuing the alphabet, E and F. It could suggest how, let's say, that the parent represents these consistent letters, which is A, D, D, D. The parent is always there, always stable for them, whereas the child, being a younger, is more unpredictable and someone who's more unreliable. So you have the kind of juxtaposition of the stable parent and the unreliable, kind of social, almost dangerous nature, unpredictable nature of the child. I hope that helped you. Please let me know if I've forgotten to mention anything. Thanks, guys. Bye.